Several years ago, I took a class taught by Seth Rolland, who's a brilliant furniture designer, and he made a comment about production work, that is, batching out multiple identical pieces of furniture. The point was that most of the successful furniture builders and designers that he knew had at some point spent time working in this way, designing a piece and then building many of them to sell. And he implied that there were insights to be gained when working this way, but didn't really expand on exactly what those were. I've also really wanted to explore and show off the production capability of the miter fold dado set. So I decided to build 10 boxes with the tool and see how it goes selling them, and also maybe learn what Seth was trying to teach us. And I'm going to show the whole process, even building the jigs and fixtures needed to optimize the production. If you make it through the whole video, you're going to learn how to win one of 6 miter fold dado sets that I'm giving away. And no skipping ahead, I'll know if you did. Okay, so here we go. Let's first consider the design of the box that I'm going to build. So here's my initial design concept. Now, the whole goal here was to make something that looked really cool, to look like it really took a lot of time, but actually be optimized for production. So every design aspect of this box was carefully considered to make sure that it was not only aesthetically pleasing, but could also be produced quickly, and that'll be obvious as I go through the build. I start by dimensioning the cherry plywood that will comprise the body of the box. Now, very quickly in the build process, I could tell how thinking about production was going to influence the way I did things, because the cost of mistakes and doing things out of order was a lot greater. It wasn't just one box I'd have to fix, it'd be 10 boxes. I never pre-finished before, but with all the glue up steps coming, it really seemed like it'd make sense. I'd still need to add finish at the end, but any squeeze out would be much easier to clean up, much less potential to mess up the veneer if I had pre-finished it. And I also decided to put together a 10-level drying rack, which would be useful for multiple steps, just to keep the pieces out of my way while the finish dries. Next, I dimension the Peruvian walnut strips that are inlaid into the ply before the miter fold dado cuts. I took the time to make a drum sander sled and really dial in the thickness, because if I get this right, then all 10 boxes will have flawless banding without any gaps. These were also ganged up and pre-finished, which really helped on cleanup. The efficiencies of production work are definitely coming to light at this point. Pre-finishing strips for the 10 boxes probably only takes twice as long, if that, as pre-finishing the strips for just one box. I wanted a good zero clearance back for the dado cuts that I'm about to make, but instead of an insert, I make a piece that I can clamp to the fence. Then I use the dado portion of the miter fold dado set to cut a rabbet around the edges of the ply board. And gang the boards up to apply tape for the dado inlay cuts. I set the stop on my miter saw for the exact width of the inlay pieces, then cut all 20 of them in 2 cuts. The inlays are glued in sequentially, and I repeat the inlay process for the perpendicular inlays on each board. The pre-finishing definitely made cleanup easier. Any glue squeeze out peeled off easily without soaking into the wood. Now it's time for some miter folding. Oh, and some cool news to share. Previously, to set up the miter fold cuts, you had to measure the thickness by hand to the nearest 64th of an inch, and then use this chart to get your setup. But if you wanted to use a caliper for more precision, it was kind of a tedious process. You'd have to take a decimal reading to the 1,000th of an inch, then you need to find where that lands between 64th inch readings, and do some math to find an in-between setup. It's really not very user-friendly. So Rockler made a web tool to do the math for you. You just plug the 3D 3-digit measurement and it gives you the setup. It works on computer or mobile, and if you bookmark the link on your phone, then you'll always have it ready in the shop. So good on you, Rockler, for building this. I think people are really going to find this helpful. Now it's time to cut, and this tool really shines when you're doing batches of something, just one setup, and you can finish off as many of the same thing as you want to. 10 in this case. With the corners removed for glue up, I decided to go the extra mile and make some clamping forms so I can get a whole bunch of clamping done in one go without using all my clamps and having them just spread all over the shop. And this might seem like overkill even for 10 boxes, but I was really trying to take a production mindset, meaning putting together a system suited to make even hundreds of boxes in the future, even if I never end up doing that. It was a good opportunity also to show off how strong the joints made by the miter fold blade are. None of these 10 forms broke, even though all of the clamping pressure goes right through those miter fold joints. And the Wood Whisperer thread taps made short work of 20 tapped holes, and then I bent some lengths of all thread, which press on wedges that drive the sides of the box together. I glued in box bottoms to the rabbets that I had initially cut. Ended up losing this video footage, but next I clean up the bottoms on the drum sander and separate the two halves on the table saw. And then again clean up that cut on the drum sander. Now it's time for the banding that separates the top and the bottom of the box. Now I sized it at exactly 1/2 the thickness of the hinges, which is important because it allows me to cut 2 dados in a larger piece, then batch out strips of banding, all with those dados cut, which are sized exactly for the width of the hinges, which is a really quick way to make these recessed hinges much quicker than chiseling. Pretty sneaky, huh? I made a setup jig to quickly make perfectly placed 45-degree cuts in these strips, and then manually laid out and sanded the angle cut on the other side, and then glued them in place. The rest of the bottom half banding was completed in a similar way, but I got a little smarter for the base. Miter folded a larger box, it does work on solid wood, and took slices of that which I could glue in all at once. I might try this for the middle banding if I ever do it again. Now I planned on just a bit of overhang on the banding, which I cleaned up with a flush trim bit. I found I got the best results if the router blade stopped just short of the edge of the banding, and then that tiny strip on the top I just shave off with a chisel. If I went any farther than that, the router bit would kind of nick up the veneer of the box, so it's better to stop short and take the time to clean it up with a chisel. Now, you may be appalled to notice that I'm using MDF core ply for this project, but it was the only figured cherry ply I could find. Now, next time I probably would go the extra step of setting up some kind of veneering step in the beginning to really have some awesome veneer overlaid on Baltic birch ply, but at least for now I included some hardwood plugs to give the small hinge screws something more substantial to thread into. And next for the trickiest part of the build, the half circle inlay on the top. I built a carriage that holds the lid exactly where I want it, with a pin that mates up with my router circle cutting jig. Once this is built, it's a simple thing to batch out the recesses that will hold the inlay pieces. And I can actually use this jig to make the template tool to cut the inlays themselves. I route a half circle in a scrap piece, then trace around it with a knife, and then carefully cut and sand to the exact edge. And now I have the perfect shape for the inlay. And this can be suspended from a jig to keep my hands clear while the rough walnut blanks are taped to the form and shaped to the perfect dimension with a flush trim bit. Now, the custom hardware is probably the most manual part of the process. I drilled, cut, and sanded these to size. Then I cut the brass handles out of stock brass rod and polished them on the drill press and tried to match the finish of the hinges, which came very close. And they're not right next to each other, so you'd never really tell that they're finished in any different way. To join the box halves, I drilled pilot holes, screwed the hinges into the bottom, then used some paper shims to get the hinges to be perfectly parallel, tops and bottoms, so that they can be glued to the top with everything aligned. And then the hinges are joined to the top with the screws. Thanks to Brusso Hardware for hooking me up with these awesome hinges for the boxes. They really are second to none. I set up a zero clearance backer to cut dados that will hold the profiled handle pieces, and then glued them in. Now, something to note, if you're sliding work pieces around on your table saw, make sure there aren't any nicks or gouges in the metal, because that's where these scratches came from. Now, I'm lucky it was on the inside, and they ended up being a lot less visible after another coat of finish, but lesson learned. Be careful of that. Now, nothing's perfect. Even after a lot of care, there were some tiny gaps. Pretty infrequent, but I mixed up some timber mate to match the dark walnut and used that to fill any gaps that I had. And now it's just some edge sanding and a few final coats of finish, and they're done.
And so, dear viewers, we now get to the what's in it for you part of the video. I'm selling these 10 boxes on Etsy, which should give me enough money to recoup the purchase of 6 miter fold dado sets, with the caveat that Rockler actually provided 3 of them, so I might actually make some money. Appreciate that, Rockler. To enter to win one of these, just share this video on a major platform, Facebook, Twitter, etc., and leave a comment in this video telling me where you shared it. Feel free to enter more than once by sharing on multiple platforms. Just leave one comment every time you do that. Good luck to everyone, which I guess kind of means equal luck to everyone, which means nothing. So I've done all I can for you at this point. Now, just to tie up some loose ends, what about Seth's comments about production work? Well, as I alluded to several times throughout the course of the build, I think the benefits of good design, good procedures, good sequences, etc. are amplified when you're doing production work, and that pushes you towards making better decisions, doing things in a more optimal way. And I certainly felt that in a way that I don't think I would have if I was just building one of these boxes. I think that's about as profound an insight as I was able to get from this. I'm glad I did it, even if I don't use all those jigs and learnings on these boxes again. It was worthwhile doing. And I think a person with a different personality than me might be able to take this design, tweak it to be, say, a humidor or another purpose-specific box that the marketplace is paying a lot for, refine the design, really cool veneer, tweak it a little bit, and actually turn this into a business. I don't think it's terribly far from that. But I guess my final learning from this project is that that's just not me. But any of you are free to adapt, riff on, use this design if you like it.
One last thing. I'm including these close-in images so that it will always be possible to identify these boxes as the ones I've produced in 2017 for this video, grain patterns being unique and such. Maybe someday someone flips over a box and sees my name and is able to trace it to this video. It's an outside chance, but you never know. Thanks for watching.